Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Representative Kim Thatcher from District 25, representing Kaiser, Newburgh, and St. Paul. And among a few other things, I want to tell you a story about a family in my district. The incident I'm going to tell you about goes back a few decades. My constituents' names were Craig and Judy Cox. They're in the back seat of a car being driven by Craig's bookkeeper and her husband. They were traveling on a back road between McMinnville and Salem, and they were struck by another car driven by a drunk foreign national who was here illegally. Craig's bookkeeper was killed. Her husband lost both his legs. Judy was in the hospital for 3 months and was left with seizures for the rest of her life. Now, fast forward to the winter of 2007, right after former Governor Ted Kulongoski issued an executive order calling on DMV to enact new rules to require proof of legal status before someone could get a driver's license. December 3rd, 2007, 72-year-old Craig Cox and his 66-year-old wife, the same couple I was telling you about decades earlier. They were traveling on the highway between St. Paul and Newburgh in a small passenger vehicle when they were hit by a drunk driver in a big van. This time it killed Judy at the scene. This drunk driver blew a 3.5 2 hours after the crash, so you can imagine what it was like at the time. He had 6 previous drunk driving convictions, multiple license suspensions and revocations. His license was issued under the pre-2007 standards. He's now serving 15 years. This drunk driver was and is somebody here illegally. I tell you the story not because I think all people without documents are driving around drunk, but I tell you this story because this is an illustration of what can happen when we issue licenses to people who shouldn't have them to begin with. Craig Cox has kept in touch with me ever since and is still too emotional to come and testify to the committee. It has been devastating. This happened right before I and several other members watched the 2008 legislature finally enact tougher standards in state law to ensure only those with proper legal presence were issued the driver's license. In 2007, many others called on tougher standards besides the governor, and in his executive order, the governor said, "It is clear that Oregon must tighten its standards for obtaining driver's licenses and identification cards in order to more effectively prevent fraud and criminal activity." Along with that bill, we passed a charge for ODOT to come back with a report and tell us how this rule is affecting, or these new rules are affecting unlicensed and uninsured driving. And the most recent report points out, in the conclusion, the results of the analysis of data from before and after changes in driver license requirements show no apparent impact on unlicensed driving. Supporters argue this new short-term license enhances safety and that this card would only be used for driving legally and obtaining insurance only and not for ID. Well, you don't have to have a driver's license to get insurance. The car has to be insured. Doesn't guarantee that the person behind the wheel is insured, and you can't unring the bell. It will be used for ID, and I'm concerned we're also setting up a double standard in Oregon. We're making it real difficult for people to jump through all these hoops. I hear complaints all the time. I'm sure many of you have had to do something to renew your license or change something, and there's a lot of it's a lot of paperwork headache. But now we're setting up an express lane, essentially, for people who, set up for people who aren't here legally to get a license, and virtually unraveling our 2008 law. And another key argument you'll hear is that illegal immigrants need a driver's license to get to and from work. But perhaps I need to remind people that under federal law, people not here legally are prohibited from employment in the United States. So why are some striving to give legal licenses to drive to jobs which are prohibited by law from even even being had in the first place. We're talking about giving people a state-sanctioned document to people who are breaking the law. And so I think these are questions you need to consider. If this is good policy, why did Tennessee repeal their program after running into all kinds of programs? And if it is such a good policy, why do only 4 states have similar laws to the one we're considering today? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.